Who brings a stick to a space battle? The captain on the bridge of the Zarul warship choked on his words as he squinted at the incoming fleet. There, nestled in Earth's defensive grid, were hundreds of metal rods. Nothing like the sleek vessels of the Galactic Alliance. No shields, no plasma cannons, not a single turret in sight. Just crude metallic rods floating in orbit, silent and unmoving. "It's an insult," muttered one of the bridge officers. "They think they can hold us off with that?" Captain Ewer grunted, though he couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Humanity had proven time and time again to be surprisingly resilient, even clever in a backwards, brute force sort of way. But as the captain watched the rods drift lazily in Earth's orbit, he let his confidence rise once more. This defense was nothing more than desperation. "This will be the shortest siege in galactic history." He laughed, and his officers joined him. Their laughter bounced off the walls of the bridge. Out in space, the human rods still drifted aimlessly. A few Zarul scouts had flown in close to scan the strange objects but found nothing dangerous. No thermal signatures, no energy cores, no defense mechanisms of any kind. They were hollowed-out shells, simple constructs that barely even qualified as ships. In all his years as a captain, Ewer had never seen such an absurd attempt at a defense. The fleet moved in formations, tightening as the warships approached the debris-ridden edge of Earth's orbit. Each vessel glided silently, flanked by fighters poised for an easy slaughter. But as they closed the distance, something peculiar happened. One by one, the floating rods began to shimmer, faint blue lights flickering on their surfaces. The captain's expression changed from smug confidence to alarm as a wave of energy signatures flared across his sensors. These rods weren't just empty shells. They were projectiles, and they were charging up. "Full shields, defensive maneuvers now," Captain Ewer barked, his earlier confidence now shredded. His orders came too late. The rods, still spinning in the darkness, each released a sudden, staggering burst of energy that shot out in all directions. It was a chaotic energy, primitive in some ways, but it hit the fleet with the force of a cosmic sledgehammer. Ships that had once seemed impervious now sparked and sputtered under the raw power slamming into them. That wasn't plasma," gasped the weapons officer as his screen flickered. "What kind of weapon is that?" "Primitive," the captain spat, though there was panic in his voice. "It's something raw, just enough to throw us off balance. These humans can't have perfected it. It's brute force, ineffective." Just as he said this, a second wave of rods shot toward them, launched from Earth's surface below. Faster this time, streaking with speed that even the Zarul scanners struggled to keep up with. These were not the awkward, lumbering rods of the first wave, but sharp, accelerated bolts tipped with a material that absorbed their energy signatures. They were silent, invisible blips in the cosmos until the very last second, at which point they hurtled through Zarul shields, tearing through halls and igniting the atmosphere within each ship. One Zarul vessel exploded, then another. Captain Ewer stared at his screens, where once proud warships were now tumbling through space, spilling metal and fire. This wasn't a defense, Ewer thought. It was a relentless, calculated attack, and I had walked my fleet straight into it. He activated the emergency comms, linked to the flagship. "Retreat, we need to reassess." But the answer from the flagship's commander was nearly drowned out by static and shouts of chaos in the background. "Negative, Captain. Your human ground defenses have us locked. They've set up a field that's interfering with our thrusters. And the gravity. They're manipulating gravity up here." As the captain tried to make sense of it, he watched another rod streak past his viewport, accelerating as if fueled by the very void itself. It hit the flagship's side, slicing through it like paper, a clean, efficient cut. Ewer had heard whispers of human technology, of their crude yet strangely effective methods for harnessing energy, but he'd never imagined they could be this ruthless. The humans hadn't bothered with showy laser displays or grand theatrical weaponry. No, they were using their knowledge of physics, of energy transfer, of gravitational manipulation, and they'd crafted a tactic so blunt and horrifyingly simple that the Zarul, with all their advanced tech, were utterly unprepared. "Humans have always been unpredictable," came the voice of his lieutenant. His voice was barely more than a whisper, but this time, Captain Ewer turned, hearing fear in the lieutenant's tone. For the first time, he noticed how young the officer looked, how unprepared he was for the merciless strategy they were now facing. Earth was no Inger just a backward planet at the edge of the galaxy. It was a death trap, and every passing second drew them further into its clutches. No, we can still regroup, Ewer said, though his words lacked conviction. They can't sustain this. They lack the resources. There. His voice trailed off as he glanced back at the view screen, where the rods were still drifting, an endless supply of crude, effective weapons. Then the human spoke. A crackling transmission cut through the noise on his bridge, echoing through the hull of his ship. It was a human voice, calm, unshaken. We warned you. We gave you chance after chance to leave us be, but you didn't listen. The Zarul officers fell silent, each one turning to the bridge speakers, transfixed by the sound. There was something disquieting about the calmness, the almost casual tone in the human's voice. We don't need grand fleets, the voice continued. We don't need a show of force. All we need is enough of these rods to remind you, enough to make sure you remember this day. This is your last chance. Turn back, or every one of you will face Earth's wrath. Captain Ewer could hardly process the words, his mind racing. The Galactic Alliance had laughed off Earth's warnings, ignored their pleas for peace, scoffed at their requests for respect, and now the humans had finally had enough. With an agonizing groan, the flagship's engine sputtered, then exploded, sending a shockwave rippling through the Zarul fleet. One by one, the scattered remnants of their once mighty ships were torn apart by the gravitational anomalies the humans had triggered in orbit, twisted and shattered by the forces they barely understood. As his ship rocked violently, Captain Ewer clutched his console, unable to ignore the terror that now gripped him. The humans weren't fighting with pride or ego. This was vengeance, simple, unyielding payback. And it was delivered with a cold finality that left no room for negotiation or retreat. The captain knew, as his ship's hull groaned under the pressure of Earth's invisible grip, that he would not survive to tell the tale. No one would ever forget this day, the day humanity snapped. Captain Ewer struggled to stay upright as the bridge shook with the relentless impact of Earth's improvised weaponry. The humans had transformed the battlefield into a nightmare, one that no Zarul officer had prepared for. Each attempt to stabilize the ship brought a fresh wave of alarms and damage reports across every console. The crew's once confident expressions had crumbled into dread. Ewer could feel it too. The humans weren't fighting for victory or honor. They were simply making an example of the invaders. This can't be happening, whispered one of his lieutenants, staring wide-eyed at the scenes unfolding on the monitors. Debris filled the void outside, chunks of what had been the fleet's strongest warships now spinning uncontrollably through space, lit by the dim glow of Earth below. Yet amidst the wreckage, those rods, those crude, vicious weapons, continued to slice through what remained of the Zarul fleet. What are we supposed to do, Captain? The weapons officer asked, clutching his console. His voice was desperate, cracking under the pressure that threatened to snap every nerve in his body. Captain Ewer gritted his teeth, forcing his own panic down. We hold position. They'll run out of ammunition soon. They have to. But even as he said it, he couldn't ignore the unease in his gut. These humans had planned this. Every one of those rods had been positioned with precision, each a silent sentinel lying in wait. They hadn't launched blindly. They'd waited until the Zarul fleet was deep enough within their trap to make escape impossible. The transmission from Earth's surface cut through the bridge again, the same calm, unshaken voice filling the tense silence. Your fleet has two options. Leave our system immediately or face complete destruction. We are done with warnings. Ewer slammed his fist against the console. Enough, he shouted, though the human voice continued on, disregarding his fury. It was as if they knew that their words were the final authority here, as if they understood that no amount of Zarul pride would alter the grim situation. Humans may not have your technology, the voice continued, but we've spent lifetimes mastering resilience, adapting to the worst our world can throw at us. You came here thinking we'd cower. A pause hung over the transmission, each second heavy with unspoken consequence. But now you're seeing what happens when you push us too far. The transmission clicked off, leaving a silence that pressed down on the bridge. Ewer could feel the weight of the words lingering like an unseen hand gripping his throat. Sir, one of his officers cried. Multiple rods incoming, velocity increasing. He turned to the viewport just in time to see another barrage streaking toward them, glowing faintly as T. Hay crossed the void. These were different from the earlier attacks, heavier, more focused. Each rod was larger, more densely packed with whatever horrifying energy the humans had devised. And then, in the final seconds before impact, they fragmented, splitting into dozens of smaller projectiles, each one slicing through shields and armor like paper. The ship groaned under the onslaught, systems failing in rapid succession. Ure staggered, gripping the armrest of his chair as the bridge lights flickered. This wasn't a fight, it was annihilation. "Sir, shields are down," shouted an officer. "Engines offline. Rear power." Ure barked, though he knew it was futile. As the ship trembled violently, Captain Ure slumped into his chair, staring blankly at the chaos surrounding him. He'd underestimated them. These humans with their strange, brutal logic and their endless capacity for defiance. They hadn't fought with honor or tradition, but with a primal ferocity that left no room for negotiation or mercy. "Pull back," he muttered, his voice hollow. "Order a retreat. What's left of us?" But the humans weren't done. As the remnants of the Zarul fleet struggled to disengage, Earth unleashed its final weapon, a massive rod, larger than anything they'd faced before. It glowed with a terrible, unnatural light, descending toward the Zarul flagship with the weight of an entire world's wrath. The last thing Captain Ure saw before his ship was consumed was the blue-green planet spinning below, its surface serene despite the chaos above. Humanity had proven its point.